I don't know about you, but my brain has been entirely consumed by the idea of an Ocarina of Time remake ever since that trailer dropped. It feels like the entire Ocarina of Time community is just freaking out right now. A lot of people are really excited to see how the game is going to look. But I will say I've also seen an equal amount of sentiment from people that are concerned with how Nintendo is going to handle this remake. Personally, I don't agree with people that are saying the art style looks bad. From the small glimpse we saw, I actually think the realistic art style could really suit Ocarina of Time, but it's really going to come down to seeing more gameplay. Ocarina of Time is widely regarded as one of the greatest games of all time, and it's going to be a tall task for Nintendo to try to live up to that legendary game. In this video, I want to talk about the top 5 things, in my opinion, that Nintendo really needs to try to get right in order for this game to be a success in my eyes. They don't necessarily have to implement all of these things for an enjoyable game, but this is my list of what I think would be some very important things for them to get right. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with anything on my list. Let's get into it. For the first thing I have on this list, I would really like to see the game have some variance from what we saw in the original game. A more optimistic Brady would ask for new dungeons, new towns throughout Hyrule, but even just some form of Easter eggs that aren't in the main game could be really helpful for making this a more enjoyable experience. I've seen a lot of discussion online about whether or not the dungeon and overworld structures are going to stay the same, and quite honestly, I've been on the fence about it. While obviously I would love to play through a reimagined version of Ocarina of Time with all kinds of new puzzles and dungeon layouts, I wouldn't at all mind if most of the game stays very faithful to the original. I think some people online are going overboard thinking we're going to get like tons of new bosses and new storylines like a light temple or a unicorn fountain. This would obviously be the most fun thing ever and the coolest thing in the world. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Nintendo remain pretty faithful to the original, and I don't 100% think that's a bad thing. However, if they do go this route of a more faithful remake to the original, I'd really like to see some Easter eggs that were not in the original game. Most of us have spent so much time exploring Hyrule that I think the game would get stale pretty quick if the entire experience is exactly the same. Even just simply having some additional collectibles or a new dialogue option or different mini-games throughout the overworld or something like that could help to make this a more fresh experience. The big thing here is I'd really like a better way to spend rupees in the late game, since after a certain point it feels like there's very few ways to spend money. I think buying cosmetics like you do in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom could play really nicely here. It allows us to really have something we can do with our money late game. I don't necessarily need them to do all of these things, I just hope they change the gameplay enough in a tangible way to make it feel like a brand new experience. The second thing I have on my list is that I'd really like to see Nintendo add plenty of quality of life features to make the game feel more seamless. This is especially important if Nintendo does go the route of doing a one-to-one remake. I know it's famously complained about the gripe for having to pause for Iron Boots in the Water Temple or whatever, but that's really just the surface level of issues. I've been lucky enough to play ROM hacks that showed the ways Ocarina of Time can be made feel much more seamless, from the pause menu to equipable D-pad items to scrollable arrow types and even ways to combine other elements of Zelda games to make action feel way more seamless. Quite honestly, I don't even think that modern Zelda gets pausing right. It's hard for combat to feel seamless when the game is essentially forcing you that every time you get hit by an enemy, you're supposed to pause and chug food like there's no tomorrow. Ocarina of Time combat is one of its strong suits, which I know is kind of a hot take, but I think it would be best and even better than the original if Nintendo's able to lean into that action by adding quality of life features to keep that action going. My ideal version of this has always been that one we saw in the Wii U Zelda trailer that never came to fruition, being able to use the gamepad to equip items while being in a fight. Now, I get it, I have zero faith in Nintendo to bring that back on the Switch too, but even so, there's better ways to fix some of these issues. In addition to those quality of life features, I would also like to see other quality of life changes that could be added due to the enhanced power of the Switch 2. Some examples could be like fully removing load zones. Not having load zones between areas could be a really cool way to make the game feel open world while keeping the story the exact same. The third thing on my list that I would really like to see in a new Ocarina of Time game would be for Nintendo to lean heavily into the cinematic nature and storytelling of the game. I do like how the trailer already teases at some light voice acting, and I personally wouldn't mind seeing it handled similarly to the way that modern Zelda games handle voice acting, with like major characters having these voice lines and impressive cinematics. The trailer also had a really nice storybook feel to it, which is a vibe that really suits Ocarina of Time nicely. All that being said, another element of this that I need to mention during this topic is that I hope the majority of these cutscenes are skippable. I'm as big of a Zelda story fan as any. I'm a huge enjoyer of a good story in a Zelda game. But one thing I notice anytime I try to replay vanilla Ocarina of Time, the cutscenes hurt the replay value. In addition to a casual fan, I'm also a very avid Ocarina of Time speedrunner, and I've beaten the game so many times over the years that this is my way to connect to the game and give it more replay value for myself, and I know I'm not alone in that. But I've also had plenty of people that are even just casuals and friends of mine say that it sucks replaying the game on vanilla because you have to watch these cutscenes over and over and over again. I think, and I also hope, that these cutscenes will be beautiful and they will be cinematic, but my biggest pet peeve in gaming is when the game forces you to watch a cutscene. Giving the player agency to skip these story cutscenes if you want to, like in Breath of the Wild or in Twilight Princess, is the best of both worlds. It allows the player to view the story if they'd like, or go back through and have more replay value from not having to watch the cutscenes over and over. If this is a good game, and I really hope it's going to be, I think some of my excitement for replay value would go away if there was a ton of cutscenes. Going back to the speedrunning, in a glitchless speedrun of Ocarina of Time, nearly 50% of the game is cutscenes. That just speaks to how many cutscenes are in this game. And while I do hope the cutscenes are beautiful, I don't want to have to watch them every single time I play the game. The fourth one is a little bit of a shorter one, but I just want to see a completely reimagined soundtrack for the game. Not because the original music isn't fantastic or anything, it's incredible, but one way a remake could really elevate the experience past the original could be giving some new takes on these classic songs. Now, I wouldn't want Nintendo to fully change the soundtrack or anything like that, but just a remastering of tunes to help bring the world together. One other feature that they could do with this is having dynamically changing music between the day and night cycles in Ocarina of Time. Because that would be a cool way to, especially if they do the open world concept I mentioned earlier, really integrate the world to itself. They could make it so going from one area to another fades from one music to another, like one soundtrack to another, kind of the same way you'd get a DJ to do that. For example, you could be riding out of Kakariko Village into Hyrule Field and the music slowly transitions a few instruments at a time, instead of just an abrupt change through a load zone like we get in the original. A small detail like this could be a huge way to make the version of Ocarina of Time feel more immersive than we've ever gotten before. Okay, we made it to the end of the list. This is my fifth and final thing I think the Ocarina of Time remake really needs. This is a little bit less concrete than the last, but it's also the most important to me personally. This is an impossible task, but I want the Ocarina of Time remake to come as close as possible to recapturing the sense of wonder that a well-crafted Zelda game can bring. The first Zelda game that I ever played was actually not Ocarina of Time. I'm a little bit too young for that. My first ever Zelda game was Twilight Princess. I still remember the excitement of going to the store with my dad to buy the game, and then popping into Borders right after to get this giant guidebook, and then sitting on the couch to try it for the first time. The game was an experience for me. There's beautiful music, a beautiful story, and as soon as I walked into Ordon Village, that became a core memory for me. I genuinely remember it to this day, even though it was 20 some odd years ago. I've seen many people say the same about growing up with Ocarina of Time, the feeling of walking out into Hyrule Field for the first time. Heck, even when I got a little bit older, I remember skipping school the first day of Breath of the Wild's release and staying home to play it all day. I skipped a Spanish midterm for that game, seriously. The insane sense of freedom and wonder of getting off the Great Plateau felt like all of these beautiful Zelda games. Well, I'm sure this is just full of nostalgia-covered glasses from a time before bills and a job and life got in my way. I would love to see Nintendo try to capture the feeling most of us had as a kid, to try to bring us a fully new immersive experience rather than just the shameless remasters we've been getting. Playing through Tears of the Kingdom, I never felt captured by the game the same way I have with other Zelda games. It's just plain and simple. It felt like the same Link dropped into the same Hyrule with just some small changes to the world. My biggest fear here is that Nintendo is not going to value the franchise of Ocarina of Time enough, and think that it is too good to change anything and keep it too similar to the original. Now, Ocarina of Time is a beautiful game for sure, don't get me wrong. It is my personal favorite game of all time, and I have spent countless hours enjoying it, but it was a product of its time. Lots of elements were cut before release due to constraints. 30 years later, we have the technology to really make Ocarina of Time into everything it could have been. I think this is probably why I love ROM hacks like The Missing Link and Ultimate Trial and Indigo so much, is that they capture the feeling of being immersed into a new world with a new story while keeping the player experience at the forefront. And that's why, if I could just ask one thing of Nintendo, I would ask them the inevitably and unduly impossible task of bringing childhood wonder back to Zelda.